Nanuchka-Class Guided Missile Corvette, Project 1234. Nanuchka comes from a project called Gadfly that was started in the 1960s. Order came down and was given to the Central Marine Design Bureau of St. Petersburg to build a cheap or inexpensive, compact, fast ship. And the designers internally named these ships Gadgets. It would have a full set of anti-ship armament on board with self-defense anti-air capability and, of course, naval guns. Admiral Sergei GORSHKOV, very famous and respected Soviet Union era admiral, said of these ships, these ships are a gun at the temple of imperialism, meaning that they could mass produce these ships if they chose to, and they would have significant anti-ship capability. Even though they were limited in range, they could make enough of these to make any kind of operation in Soviet waters very difficult for NATO nations. The primary purpose of this ship were like threefold. First was to patrol over the communication lines. Russia, or Soviet Union back then, were getting frustrated with the Americans spying on them and tapping their submarine communication cables. So while this ship didn't have any ASW capability, they wanted to be able to patrol over the cables and just keep Americans away from them for as far out into the ocean as possible. Again, these are coastal vessels. They do provide escorts for other ships, of course, coastal patrol, like I said, and a very interesting capability that was up and coming at this time was the passive radar detection capability, where this is the beginning of electronic warfare, where we don't just simply broadcast our radars anymore. We listen first, see who's out there. Maybe we can get a little bit closer to the bearing in the direction of a transmitting radar and then surprise them by turning on our radars and launching an attack. So these were one of the first ships that the Soviet Union made, and certainly the first one of this Corvette class to have this capability. 4 versions of the Nanuchka class will be produced over 3 decades, and there is a modernization that we will talk about at the end of the lecture. So let's begin with Nanuchka 1 by the numbers. This is the baseline on which all the other ones are going to be built on. You will see some reports that this program began in the late 1960s, and technically that's true because the keel for Hull 1 was laid in the late 1960s, but it was not commissioned until 1970. The weights, the tonnages on these vary from source to source, but according to Jane's, they are 770 tons when fully loaded, these ships. Obviously, the export version is believed to be less, somewhere closer to 690 tons, because it has less main armament, primarily. They can make 34 knots. They're 59 meters long, 11.8 meters wide. They have 3 507 diesel engines that each push a shaft, so 3 shafts, for a total of 32,000 horsepower. At 12 knots, she can make 2,500 miles before being refueled, and the crew is estimated to be 45 crew plus 7 officers, and this really does vary from ship to ship, and the export versions have 50 total crew members on board, so a little bit of variance in the crew. Let's take a look at the armaments here. They have 6 P-120 SSN-9 SIREN anti-ship missiles. This is the primary purpose of this ship, is to take these missiles out to sea, detect another ship, and sink it. And they're quite capable of doing that. This is a very powerful missile, even by today's standards, but this is in the 1970s. So cutting edge stuff. The ship is defended by the SA-9 GECKO SAM system, limited range of about 8 miles. The twin 57 millimeter AAA cannon on the back is designed for anti-air as well. This cannon would be upgraded in future versions of the Nanuchka. This is the only version that has the 57 millimeter. All future ones will have the 76 millimeter and have a single barrel. It has 2 decoy launchers on the bow, also the Bell Tap ESM and Bell Nest ELINT, which is that electronic warfare suite on the mast, designed for listening. Muff Cob fire control radar directs the twin 57 millimeter. That will be removed in future variants and replaced with Bass Tilt. And of course, Bandstand fire control radar controls the anti-ship missiles and is also a great surface and air radar. All right, the construction of these ships will happen in St. Petersburg and Vladivostok. St. Petersburg primarily will build the most of these, but Vladivostok provides some as well. The SSN-9 SIREN anti-ship missile, also known as the P-120, is a subsonic 110-kilometer range conventional anti-ship missile that does have nuclear capability. Its warhead is 500 kilograms of high explosive. It flies at 200 meters above the waterline until it reaches a terminal point at which it turns on its radar, and it dips down to 40 meters off the water, searching for ships to kill. The SAN-4 GECKO surface-to-air missile is basically a point defense missile because it only has 8 nautical mile range. You're not really doing a area denial with this weapon. It's just strictly to protect the ship and the ships around the ship. It has a 20 missile magazine, and you can see it right there on the bow. And those missiles are directed by pop group radar, also mounted on the bow. Here's a close-up of that twin 57mm 80 AAA cannon. It is the AK-257 Soviet naval gun. It was originally IOC'd in the 1950s, been around for a while. It's a well-tested system, radar-guided, and it has a magazine of 1,100 rounds and will be immediately ripped off when we build Nanuchka 2, 3, and 4. Electronic suites are... We have bandstand, pop group on the bow. You know, like I said, pop group is for the surface-to-air missiles. Bandstand is for the surface-to-surface missiles. Bell nest and bell tap are for ELINT and ESM listening. We also have, you can see a fishbowl data link there. It literally looks like a fishbowl. That's why they call it that. It's, if you're looking, there's not a arrow to it. It's that little fishbowl-looking gray sphere just behind the surface-to-surface missile launcher there. All right, Nanuchka 2, they built 11 of these units, and the main difference is they took off the 6 anti-ship missiles and added only 4 of a lesser capable anti-ship missile called the SSN-2 Bravo Styx missile. And this is the version that they sold around the world. India bought 4 units, Algeria bought 3 units, one of which they still operate and they've upgraded, and Libya bought 4 units, one of which was sunk in a Gulf of Syria incident right here on the 24th of March, 1986. You may remember the line of death and Gaddafi declaring the Gulf of Sidra as Libyan waters and nobody's allowed to cross it. And of course, the Americans being deployed in the Mediterranean immediately crossed the line. Well, these ships came out to investigate the intruders, and along with shooting down some air assets, they also sank one of these Nanuchkas. This was an Nanuchka 2. They damaged a second one that had to be towed back to port and was later just decommissioned. So, and it was the A6 Intruder aircraft that attacked these vessels. Very, famous incident at the time. This was all over the news when this happened. But let's move on to Nanuchka 3. This is the one that they made the most of, and this is really, really capable stuff. They made 19 total units here. This one ILC'd in 1977. So while all the Nanuchka 1s are decommissioned now, the Nanuchka 3 continues to thrive and is being modernized, the ones that they're keeping. This one has 6 SSN-9, anti-ship missiles, just like the Nanuchka 1 has. The naval gun on the back has been upgraded to 76 millimeters and is controlled by that base tilt radar, which also controls the point defense AK-630 point defense cannon there. And this is this one would be in service in this configuration until 2017. So they got a lot of use out of this, considering that they began building this variant in 1977. There is a Nanuchka 4 that's worthy of mentioning, even though they only built one. It was a very important test platform for Russia's current anti-ship missile, the SSN-25 Switchblade missile. This missile is claimed, or reportedly, has a 300-kilometer range. It is essentially an extended range harpoon. When I was in the Navy, we called these the harpoon skis because it appears as if they just copied the harpoon. Somehow they got the design plans or something, and they just made their version of the harpoon. And then they gave it the extended range, rocket motor and turbojet capability. It has a turbojet sustainer. But there's only one of these. And it was only used for testing and training. But the Nanuchka 3s are being modernized, and there are 20 of these if you count the Algerian one. These have quad launchers of the SSN-25 Switchblades for a total of 16 anti-ship missiles. This gives this little coastal patrol craft a hell of a first punch. It is very, very deadly. This is as many, missiles as, say, 8 LCSs. It's quite the anti-surface ship. These new Switchblade missiles, whenever they are going into their strike mode after their terminal phase, they're only 5 meters above the ground. So very low to the ground, sea skimming anti-ship missiles that pack a 480 kilogram warhead that are designed to just rip ships apart. And it can launch these, one right after the other. It could put 16 in the air at once because each weapon in its terminal phase is independent. It's self-guiding. And this gives this ship a lot of modern anti-ship capability. It's very, very impressive, very capable. And these are still operational. So my final thoughts, honestly, are this little ship is worth every ruble they spent designing and modernizing it. They get a lot of use out of it. It pales in comparison, to like our LCS program, which is the closest thing we have to the ship on the American side. This thing has many more weapons, much more capability, is almost as fast as our LCS. That's the one thing the LCS has over this, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. These things are very inexpensive to make and maintain, and that's why countries like Algeria and India still operate these ships.